In both its art collection and setting, the Getty Villa reflects antiquity's enduring inspiration. It celebrates the famed architecture of Italy's Bay of Naples, symbolized in the form of an archaeological site, and as the ancient Romans may have envisioned their ideal surroundings. When oil investor J. Paul Getty first imagined a museum, he conceived of a building that wouldn't simply house his art collection, but provide a perfect context for it. To realize this vision, he consulted architect Stephen Garrett.
Getty suddenly said on a November evening in 1968, in his rather deep voice, "I want to recreate the Villa de Paperi." I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about, and I think that very few people, except for a few scholars of antiquity, would have known what he was talking about. What he was talking about was a large country house that had been on the slopes of Vesuvius, just outside Herculaneum, and had been destroyed when Vesuvius had erupted in 79 AD.
The Villa de Papiri was first discovered in the 18th century under layers of hardened volcanic debris. Excavators for the Bourbon King of Naples cut tunnels deep underground through rock-like material in order to explore it. The works of art they discovered were added to the king's collection. They also found hundreds of burned papyrus rolls, which later gave the Villa de Papiri its name. Because of these philosophical texts, scholars believe that the home's owner may have been Lucius Calpurnius Piso, Julius Caesar's father-in-law.
Getty had always been fascinated by antiquity, and clearly this large country house fascinated him particularly, partly with its grandeur, partly with his association with Julius Caesar, partly with the extraordinary objects that were found when it was excavated.
In Getty's time, and even today, most of the Villa de Papiri remains buried underground. Fortunately, the engineer in charge of the original excavations had drawn a precise map. It was that ground plan that served as the starting point for the Getty Villa. The museum's design reflects not only the Villa de Papiri, but also ancient dwellings preserved in the flows of Vesuvius. Luxury homes in Herculaneum, Pompeii, and Atlantis, once graced with frescoes, gardens, and works of art. Getty's love of art developed out of a keen interest in history and travel. In the 1960s, he owned a villa in the Bay of Naples, a place he found captivating. As a young man, he toured Europe while attending college at Oxford. Later, as his oil empire and wealth grew, Getty visited the Mediterranean and Near East and developed a passion for collecting art.
He bought his first antiquity in 1939, actually, at an auction in London. And some of the pieces that he collected over the next 20 years are still very important for our installation today. He bought the magnificent Lansdowne Heracles. He bought the portrait of a woman as a priestess of Cybele, and also the beautiful portrait of Julia Titi.
At first, the art Getty collected was displayed in one of his homes, a large ranch-style house still located on the villa grounds.
In the 1950s, the ranch house was converted into a kind of house museum. It was open 3 days a week. Afternoons only. It was a rather relaxed pace, but people were able to come and see these wonderful antiquities together with the old master paintings and the splendid French furniture he had collected.
But even after a wing was added to the house, it wasn't enough space to accommodate the art. And as Getty's collection expanded, he wanted to share it with a wider audience. Construction on the villa began in the early 1970s. By this time, Getty was living in England, but was still eager to oversee the work. He hired Stephen Garrett to travel between Malibu and London to update him on its progress. He took great interest in every aspect, from the pouring of cement foundations to the selection of floor tile colors. J. Paul Getty died in 1976 without ever seeing the villa. But what he bequeathed to the institution as his legacy to art continues to flourish.
The villa opened in 1974, and over the next 23 years, the collections grew incredibly. All the collections, not just the antiquities. And not only had the collections grown, the Getty Trust itself had grown to include a conservation institute, a research institute, educational programs, and the staff of the Getty Trust itself. For that reason, the Board of Trustees decided to build a new museum and other buildings which would house these growing activities. But the critical decision they made for the villa was that it would always remain the home to the Getty's Antiquities collection.
The challenging task of reimagining the villa began several years before the building closed for renovation in 1997. The second floor, which originally held old master paintings and French furniture, had to be redesigned for antiquities. Other considerations included adding natural light and unifying the museum visually.
Everything you see on the second floor is new. Everything. Doors, the windows, the skylights, the floors, the colors, and of course the whole gallery around the inner peristyle, which is now flooded with light.
While planning for the renovations of the villa, we also made an important decision about the installation of the collections. We decided that they should be installed thematically or by subject matter. The layout of the villa actually lends itself very well to this kind of installation, as one moves constantly between indoor and outdoor spaces.
The villa's outdoor areas visually echo the galleries. Replicas of sculptures found in Pompeii and Herculaneum are arranged throughout the gardens. And plants cultivated in ancient times, often depicted in the museum's art and architecture, thrive here. One difference between Herculaneum and Malibu is that the villa sits in a narrow canyon. The architects considered this steep terrain as they created their site plan. Their solution embraces the metaphor of an archaeological dig, as a contemporary visitor would find in Herculaneum today.
The site was really about archaeology. An archaeological site does not have one primary ground floor. The ground floor is where you are because it's composed of the stratifications of different eras. Our architecture is more an architecture of the earth, an architecture of an excavation, and it is organized in strata, these horizontal bands of elements that frames the villa.
Next to the villa, ancient plays are performed in a new outdoor theater, reflecting the integral role of theater in the cultures of ancient Greece and Rome. The villa complex also houses studios for antiquities conservation, which cares for the museum's art collection and undertakes partnerships with museums worldwide. The Getty Trust established 2 new programs at the villa. A scholars program within the Getty Research Institute fosters new research in classical antiquity. The program is built around an extraordinary library for the visual arts, with a mix of invited scholars who pursue their own research and engage in cooperative and collaborative projects. Also at the villa, the Getty Conservation Institute, in partnership with UCLA, is offering the only master's program in the United States that will train students to work on archaeological sites and ethnographic materials, with dedicated laboratories and facilities at the villa itself. J. Paul Getty's original vision for the villa remains an enduring one, a setting that brings the spirit of ancient Roman civilization and the art of the ancient Mediterranean to life.
Getty had very clear views about what he wanted to achieve here. He wanted a person that came here to get some idea of what a villa way back 2,000 years ago would actually have felt like. What did a Roman citizen feel like walking around the gardens, walking around the rooms, walking around the original peristyle gardens? For example, he was keen that there should be an herb garden because it implied that the Romans actually used the herbs, that they used them for their cooking. They were living here. They were human beings at their own time with their own ideas and excitement of what they wanted.